I have covered dozens of hauntings and paranormal happenings on this channel, some famous, some infamous, and others less known. But what I think is important as well is to help use my platform to share other people's stories of their experiences with the supernatural, to show that these experiences are indeed real and that they do truly happen. These are subscriber submitted stories, and all I ask is that you keep an open mind. These are your paranormal encounters. When I was in junior high, me and my best friend at the time played with a new Ouija board that she had got for Christmas. We messed around for a while, but nothing happened, so we got bored and put it away. A few weeks later, I was at her house again and was playing around with the record feature and my flip phone. My friend left to use the bathroom, and I kept messing around with the phone. It was just me and her cat alone in the basement. I made a recording of me and the cat meowing at each other, innocent kid stuff, but when I played it back, there was this really deep, animalistic grunting sound in the recording that was definitely not there when I was initially making it. It also was way too deep sounding to possibly be from a 14-year-old girl or a little cat. It was a few years later before anything else happened. Next, I was around 16 to 17 years old, and we moved in with my mom's boyfriend. My room always felt dark and uncomfortable, like I was always being watched even when I was alone. After a while, weird things started to happen. Things would go missing, then later reappear in the middle of my desk or someplace obvious. I would hear tapping and scratching on the walls in my room when everyone was asleep. I would get horrible nightmares, not like anything I'd ever experienced before. One time, I got a scratch across my leg while I was sitting in my bed. I looked around but could not find anything sharp that could have done it. Last was the bed shaking. Every night, along the wall scratching, creepy feeling, and nightmares, my bed would shake. Not hard, but just enough to make me notice. No heavy traffic or trains nearby, and there was no construction going on. It happened in my room only. I would sleep with my mom or my sister after a while because I couldn't handle it anymore. One time, my mom got curious and slept in my bed to see what the big deal was, and it shook her too. A few years later, we all moved out. I moved in with my future husband, and we rented the basement at his childhood home for a couple years. While there, 3 weird things happened, and it was the first time I ever saw anything. The first was this big black dog that just appeared in our living room. I blinked, and it vanished. The second was in the kitchen. I was cooking dinner when I glanced to the side and saw a tall man with curly hair and a ball cap. When I told my husband the description, I remembered more of the description back in the day. It's been 10 years since this happened. He told me I just described his older brother. Sadly, his older brother lost his fight with depression long before I ever met my husband, and he actually passed away in the same basement we were living in. The last thing that happened, I think, was either his brother again or an energy imprint. I was in the kitchen again and asking my husband what he wanted for dinner, and he replied something unhelpful along the lines of, "Whatever you want." Well, a few minutes later, I get a call from my husband. He wasn't even home at the time of that conversation. Who was I talking to? I would like to let you know that I do not have any mental illness or neurological issues that would make me hallucinate. I never drank or did drugs. We also had a brand new carbon monoxide detector installed when we had moved in, so there would be no reason for me to hallucinate any of that. My last experiences in my current home, and it happened a few years ago. I was pouring some ramen noodles into bowls for my kids' lunch when the bowls started to spin in different directions without me touching them. I stopped and then stepped back, and they stopped spinning, then spun one more time before finally stopping altogether. There are more minor experiences I've had, but these were the most memorable. I hope it was interesting enough for what you were looking for. I certainly think it was. You certainly had a variety of paranormal experiences from the sounds of it, but the nightmares, the scratching on the walls, and the shaking of my bed would have been downright terrifying. What really takes the cake for me is the fact that you had a conversation with something pretending to be your husband, and your husband wasn't even there. All around, thank you for sharing this with us, Gail. Hello, big fan and submitting my story. I've always had an interest in the paranormal my entire life, but was never really convinced up until this event. It was spring of 2015, and I was working on a conservation crew in Lake Tahoe, doing fire hazard removal and fuels reduction with the Forest Service on a chainsaw crew. I had been doing this job for a year in Nevada, and this was my first time in the area. Our workday came to a close, and mind you, this is the day one of our schedule out of a 6-day work week. And we left Incline Village towards our designated campsite at Spooner Lake in Carson City. After our crew set up camp and ate dinner, myself and 2 other co-workers took a brief walk down the service trail until we got to an intersection on the trail that wasn't surrounded by trees. We shoot the breeze and smoke American spirits for about 45 minutes to an hour, laughing and just talking about life, when out of nowhere, in the corner of my left eye, I see a white mist and the silhouette of a person, about 6 feet tall, just glide diagonally from behind a tree. It stands motionless in the middle of the trail we're on, and I can see the dirt of the trail underneath it because it had no feet, but its legs conjoined just after its knees. I couldn't see through it because it was so dense from whatever it was made out of. I whispered my coworker's name to get them to look up from their phone, and as he looks up, he says, "What?" And then he too became frozen as he stared right at this figure. I ask him if he sees it too, and he says, "I think it pierced my soul." While my other coworker is oblivious to all of this happening, it suddenly notices us noticing it and glides slowly, diagonally, across the trail and behind a tree and was gone. The angle in which it moved seemed as though it was a direction or path that we cannot conceive. Anyway, we run back to our campground, which was about 100 to 200 yards away, and just went back to our tents without saying a word to each other or the rest of the crew. The real amazing part about this experience was that unbeknownst to me or anyone in my crew, is that next to the lake are these hills that gradually go up, and every morning this fog would roll down these hills, and it just looks incredible. However, it is the exact same density and material that the figure seemed to be composed of. I think the spirit is somehow part of nature, and maybe burning tobacco brought it out, as if it were an offering. After all, this is an ancient land. That was my experience. I hope you enjoyed it. I did enjoy it, Nick. It sounds super creepy, though, in my opinion. And perhaps you're right. Maybe the offering brought forth some type of ancient spirit that dwells the area. Translucent and or composed of fog just sounds so eerie to me. Thank you for sharing this with us. This must have happened in 1986 or 87, which made me about 6 or 7 at the time. It is important to note that where we were staying back then, a suburb and then Pretoria, currently referred to as the city of Tahoe, a large city even then. Our house was situated only a few blocks from one of the busiest streets in the city, a broad 4-lane with constant traffic both ways, big trucks right through the night barreling off into the distance. The kind of consistent drone I imagine a New Yorker living in Manhattan might experience, even in the dead of night. On this particular night, my mother was alone in the living room with our faithful family golden spaniel, watching some late-night TV. Myself and my younger sister were both already sound asleep. My elder brother was keeping to himself in his bedroom. My father was not in the picture at the time. A perfectly serene scene. It must have been about 10 p.m., a warm summer evening, and our living room front door was open to allow the pleasant evening air inside. The first thing my mom noticed was a feeling of unease. The feeling was intense and unignorable. She got up and crossed the living room to the outside porch, the dog following behind her. According to her account, this is when things got super weird. Upon exiting the house, she immediately noticed an eerie silence hanging over the place. It was as if some huge vacuum cleaner had just gone and sucked every bit of ambient noise out of the air. No crickets chirping, of which there should be many in high summer. Not a breath of air. No dog barking in the distance. And most disturbing of all, not even the faintest whisper of traffic anywhere, near or far. Furthermore, the air had acquired a distinct dull quality. A feeling almost like your ears needed to pop. Almost thickened, denser, making it somehow harder to draw a breath. Just when you think it couldn't get weirder, the dog who was standing close by broke into a long, drawn-out, sorrowful howl, seeming filled with immeasurable anguish. This was not her habit and was highly unusual. She had never before exhibited such behavior, and never again did afterwards. It must have been around this time, from all that I can glean, that my brother, having fallen asleep on his bed, was woken up, not by the dog's howling, but from feeling cold. This was slightly unusual this time of year. I believe it might have even been the dog that woke him after all, yet he only remembers waking up from the cold feeling that he had. He was around 11 or 12 years old back then. He surely must have sensed something amiss as well, for his immediate instinct was not to cover himself in order to escape the cold. Instead, he opted to get up and go investigate, upon which he met my mom in the passage, going in the opposite direction. Not a word was exchanged between them, my mom continuing on to her room, and my brother, still somewhat befuddled, continued to the living room and out onto the porch, still with no clear directive. I think this was when the dog started howling again, having moved to the center of the narrow front lawn that we had. Now my mom has returned, having fetched her Bible from the bedside table, standing resolutely next to my brother. Though I confess to placing no great stock in the Bible itself as a tool of any great power, and am no supporter of the concept of religion, neither is my mom anymore, and maybe it was my mother's sheer power of faith, which is considerable. In any event, these are the facts as it occurred. My mom wasted no time opening the Bible, randomly and earnestly, starting a heartfelt prayer. The exact nature of her prayer is altogether irrelevant, save for her deep-rooted faith in its effectiveness. The effect was immediate and dramatic. At once, all ambient sound and natural warmer air came back in a rush, It was almost an audible, tangible whooshing sound. The dog stopped howling. She approached the humans now, tail wagging and panting, totally back to normal, except that she couldn't hide her obvious relief. This marked the end of the episode. As to the origins thereof, we have speculated over the years, but are careful to not make any definitive accusations towards anyone. The person who was approached with a warning to lay off, still to this dying day, denied all knowledge of being involved. However, on one thing, we are all unanimous. Foul play was involved, an ancient form of the blackest arts. Genevieve, thank you as well for sharing your story with us. It seems like whatever this thing was caused everything to be still, almost like some kind of time warp, which sounds very creepy indeed. I'm glad that your mother found whatever authority it was that she needed to send this thing away and allow everything to get back to normal for you guys. First, I'd like to say that I appreciate all of you guys that did allow me to retell your stories. I appreciate you having the courage to submit them as well, because not a lot of people do. And overall, I hope I did your experiences justice. If you would like to submit a story for the next episode, because I would like to make this a regular thing if it's possible, please email me at mysteryarchives@gmail.com. Please like the video if you liked it, leave me a comment, subscribe with notifications, and share this around. Other than that, guys, like I've said, these experiences are very real, and they do occur a lot more often than people would like to think. Anyways, guys, I love you all. Thank you for being an amazing and supportive community. And as always, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Remember to please stay safe out there, and take care. I'll see you next time.